Welcome to the Sun today for the 23rd of January 2022. The big news today is we've had 3 coronal mass ejections. This is the Sunspot summary that I posted to my Twitter account first thing this morning. You can see that there's a number of things going on here. First of all, GEOSPACE is relatively quiet. The sunspot number 2, is continuing to decline. Number 3 shows we've had no new sunspot regions, and in fact, regions that are there are weak and disappearing rapidly, with the exception of 2934, which is a single large spot. Number 4 shows the X-ray background, which is steadily dropping over the last 3 days and is now at approximately the B1 level, and we've had no significant flares during that time. Number 5 is a new feature, and unfortunately I made a typo in this. It says 73 days since the last spotless day. That's not true. It's 43 days. I've also added a CME watch to my Twitter channel. In the last day, as I said, we have 3 coronal mass ejections shown by the Soho-Lascaux instrument. One was a large one off the southeast limb and was associated with a filament eruption. The other was from behind the northeast limb, and the third was associated with a filament eruption on the surface in the northeast. None of these are likely to produce a geomagnetic storm because they are too far east. So let's take a look at the sunspot regions for what it's worth. Active region 2932 is hanging in there, and I do not understand why. It has been there for about 10 days as just a string of tiny little spots, and normally these would have disappeared very quickly, but they're still there. Next is active region 2933. That is a large single spot, but it's very close to the limb and will be disappearing in the next day or two. In the southeast, we have active region 2933. It's a single alpha spot that has come over the limb and hasn't changed much in the last few days. So that will probably be with us for a little while as yet. Behind that region, there is a single spot to the north and east of that active region. It doesn't look as though it's going to last very long, but we'll have to wait and see. As I mentioned before, the sunspot number has continued to decline, at least the official one has, and you can see how much lower it is than the equivalent time during the last Carrington rotation, where at this time it was about 100, now it's down to 20. So that's a significant decay in the number of regions on the sun. Some people put a lot of stock in the number of spotless days as an indicator of what the solar cycle is going to do and has done. I don't personally, but for completeness I've put it in here. I've plotted here the number of spotless days so far during solar cycle 25, month by month. You can see the cycle started off with about 80% of the days being spotless, and we've now dropped to less than 10% of the days being spotless. And if you believe the model, then we shouldn't be getting any more spotless days in the foreseeable months, and we certainly are not going to reach the 307 level before solar maximum. GOES X-ray flux has continued to decline along with the sunspot number, which is again not surprising. We're now down to the B1 level, and we've not had any significant flares in the last 3 days. We've had a few minor B flares, but no C flares or higher. So let's take a look at the sunspot movie. This is using the SDO HMI instrument. We're going to do 2 repeats of this, and the data covers the 20th to the 23rd of January. As there are no flares to look at, let's content ourselves with looking at the low temperature corona. To that, we're going to do the 171 angstrom channel and do 2 repeats of that. This is a temperature of about 600,000 degrees Kelvin. So let's take a look at those coronal mass ejections, and for that we're going to use the Soho-Lascaux C2 and C3 coronagraphs over the period from the 21st to the 23rd of January. But first, let's take a look at the source region and see what was going on there. To do that, we're going to go to the AIA instrument again, but this time we're going to look at the helium-2 304 channel, which is about 50,000 degrees. And this therefore looks at the cool plasma, the sort of plasma that's being erupted away from the sun when you get a coronal mass ejection. So where do you look on these movies? It's quite subtle, so you have to be careful. The first CME, the largest of the CMEs, originates from a filament eruption down in the southeast, which I've circled here on the left. The second CME comes from, I think, behind the limb because I see no surface features being involved in that at that time. The third comes from the northeast, and it seems to be associated with the activity in this filament marked here. GEOSPACE is quiet, although not as quiet as it was a couple of weeks ago, but nonetheless it hasn't had anything above KP equals 3. The next level up, KP equals 4, is what's called disturbed. A quick look in on the solar wind. You can see that the BZ component, the vertical component of the magnetic, which is very important for whether it reconnects with the Earth's magnetosphere, has taken a dive to the south, which is usually an indication that you're going to get some increase in activity. But we haven't seen that as yet. And probably that's because the speed of the solar wind has dropped so much. It's now between 300 and 400. And as I remind you of just a few days ago, it was nearly 700. So the speed has actually dropped significantly. On the right, we have a picture of the sun taken in the 193 channel, and that shows coronal holes. And we have two coronal holes, one in the western hemisphere, which I think should be producing some significant activity. I'm surprised we haven't seen something more from it. But also there's another one coming along behind it in the eastern hemisphere. And so sort of in a week's time, that will be where the other one is. So we have a couple of opportunities of getting some high-speed solar winds that might produce a disturbed magnetosphere or even a low-level geomagnetic storm. So what conclusions can we draw from all of this? The sunspot number is declining, but new region coming over the northeast limb might actually improve that situation in a day or two. There have been no significant flares for at least 3 days. We had 3 CMEs, but they're not related to flares and they've been too far east to affect the Earth. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.